Everyone who saw it died. Not just one person, not just two. Every single member of the Chapman family who witnessed what happened that September day in 1941 is now dead. The two young boys drowned, the 5-year-old girl dead in her bed, and the parents, George and Jeannie Chapman, who survived the initial encounter. They drowned 18 years later in the Fraser River, just 1 month after telling their story to a researcher. 7 people, 1 family, all dead after a single afternoon encounter with something that shouldn't exist. The indigenous peoples of British Columbia have a warning that's been passed down for thousands of years. Never look a Sasquatch in the eyes. If you do, death follows. The Chapman family didn't know this warning. Or maybe they did, but in that moment of terror, they forgot. Tonight, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened on that sunny afternoon in Ruby Creek, British Columbia. This isn't folklore. This isn't campfire tales. This is a documented incident, investigated by law enforcement, confirmed by multiple witnesses, with physical evidence that remained for years. This is the Ruby Creek incident, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why some encounters in the wilderness carry consequences that echo through time. Let me take you back to September 1941. The Chapman family lived 30 miles up the Fraser River from Agassiz, British Columbia, in a small settlement called Ruby Creek. George worked on the railroad. Jeannie stayed home with their 3 children, ages 9, 7, and 5. Their cabin sat at the edge of wilderness so vast it seemed endless, with mountains looming in the distance, their peaks crowned with ancient forests. It was approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun blazed in a cloudless sky. Jeannie's 2 younger children were playing in the field behind the house near the railroad tracks. Her eldest son was keeping watch. Then he came running, not walking, running with pure terror on his face. "Mother! There's a cow coming down out of the woods." A cow. That's what his 9-year-old mind decided to call it. Because what else could it be? Jeannie noticed her son's unusual panic. She stepped outside, scanning the tree line at the foot of the nearby mountain. At first, she saw what appeared to be a large bear moving among the bushes near the railway tracks. She immediately called her other 2 children to her. But then the creature stepped onto the railroad tracks and stood upright. Jeannie Chapman's blood turned to ice. It wasn't a bear, it was walking on 2 legs, moving with purposeful strides directly toward their home. The thing was a gigantic man, if you could call it that. 7.5 feet tall, covered entirely in hair. Not fur, hair. Thick, coarse hair, about 4 inches long, covering every inch of its massive body. The color was pale yellowish brown, like lightly varnished wood. Its chest was impossibly thick, barrel-like. Its shoulders were extraordinarily wide. Its arms hung long, reaching past where its knees should be. Most disturbing, it had almost no neck, just a small head sitting directly atop those massive shoulders. The naked parts of its face and hands were dark, almost black. Its face showed no expression as it advanced, but its eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes, locked onto Jeannie Chapman. And in that moment, she understood. This creature was looking at her children. Jeannie did something extraordinary. While many would have fled immediately, she stood her ground. The creature was now 300 feet away and closing. She needed seconds to make a decision. "Get a blanket!" she shouted to her oldest son. "Round up your brother and sister!" The boy dashed inside, grabbed a blanket, and returned. Those 2 or 3 minutes felt like hours. By the time he came back, the creature was only 100 feet away. Jeannie spread the blanket wide and held it up like a shield, blocking the creature's view of her children. If it couldn't see them, maybe it would search the house instead of pursuing them. She backed toward the river, keeping the blanket between her children and the creature. Then they ran. They ran downstream toward Ruby Creek Village, not looking back. Behind them, they could hear heavy footfalls as the creature entered their home. George Chapman returned from work shortly before 6 o'clock that evening. He'd taken a route that bypassed the village, so he had no warning. The first thing he noticed was the woodshed door, battered in and splintered. Then he saw them, enormous humanoid footprints everywhere, in the dirt, around the house, near the buildings. Each print was massive, pressed deep into the earth. His family was gone. "Genie! Children!" His voice echoed across the empty property. Then he spotted their tracks leading toward the river. He followed them, relief flooding through him when he saw they continued downstream with no giant tracks pursuing them. But as George retraced his steps, he found the creature's enormous tracks. They led from the potato patch, across a 4-foot barbed wire fence the thing had simply stepped over, through the creek and into the forest. Inside the woodshed, George found something that defied belief. A 55-gallon barrel of salted fish had been torn apart with bare hands, no tools, just raw strength. The contents were scattered everywhere. Long brown hairs clung to the doorway above George's head, confirming the creature's impossible height. He found his family at his father-in-law's house, traumatized. George gathered several armed men and returned to protect his family. But the creature came back. Every night for a week, fresh footprints appeared, circling the cabin like a predator marking territory. Twice, at exactly 2 in the morning, the family's dogs howled with primal fear, and then they heard it, a sound George and Jeannie would later describe as a gurgling whistle, unlike anything produced by any known animal, something between human and animal, something wrong. After 1 week of nocturnal terror, the Chapman family made an unthinkable decision. In 1941, during wartime when resources were scarce and homes were precious, they abandoned their cabin. They walked away from everything and never returned. What would it take for you to abandon your home during World War II? The fear must have been overwhelming. 18 years later, in 1959, researcher Ivan Sanderson tracked down the Chapmans to interview them. He was writing about cryptid encounters and wanted first-hand accounts. During the interview, Mrs. Chapman revealed one final detail. The creature had made an awful funny noise. George replicated it, that same gurgling whistle that matched reports from California 600 miles away. Sanderson was convinced of their honesty. He wrote, "I absolutely refuse to listen to anybody who might say they were lying." But there was something else in Sanderson's account, something he noted with deep sadness. All 3 Chapman children who witnessed the creature were dead. The 2 boys had drowned. The little girl had died on her sickbed, all within 3 years of the incident, and about 1 month after Sanderson's interview, George and Jeannie Chapman drowned when their rowboat capsized crossing the Fraser River late at night. Every single member of that family who witnessed the creature is now dead. Now you might think, that's just coincidence, and maybe you're right, but there's something else. Many First Nations people carry specific warnings about the Sasquatch. One of the most persistent: never look a Sasquatch in the eyes. If you make eye contact, you invite disaster. Death follows. When Sanderson asked Mrs. Chapman if she'd heard this belief, she claimed she hadn't, but I've spoken with First Nations elders myself. A local chief near Harrison Hot Springs told me that when he was younger, he encountered a Sasquatch, but was careful never to look it in the eyes. He'd been taught since childhood that to do so would bring death. So was there truth to the legend? Did the Chapman family make the fatal mistake of locking eyes with something ancient and powerful, something that marked them? What makes Ruby Creek so compelling is the evidence. This wasn't just another story lost to time. The exact location is known and was investigated by John Green and Renee Darhinden, 2 of the most respected cryptozoologists in history. Both believed the incident was genuine. Deputy Sheriff Joe Dunn from Washington crossed the border to investigate, the first time US law enforcement investigated a Canadian Sasquatch incident. multiple witnesses saw the footprints. A track cast was reportedly taken by police. This happened in September 1941, 17 years before the term Bigfoot was even coined. The Chapmans had no cultural template for what they'd seen. Their description came from raw, terrified observation. The forests surrounding Ruby Creek remain vast and largely unexplored. Sasquatch Provincial Park sits just 4 miles from where the Chapman cabin once stood. The area is notorious, with sightings continuing to the present day. Something lives in those mountains, something powerful enough to tear apart a 55-gallon barrel with its bare hands, something intelligent enough to return night after night, something that stands nearly 8 feet tall and watches from the tree line with dark, knowing eyes. The indigenous peoples have known about these creatures for thousands of years. They've established taboos and passed down warnings. The Yokut people speak of the hairy man as a psychopomp, a being who escorts the dying to the other side. When you see him, someone is about to die. The Chapman family saw him, and one by one, they all died. If you ever find yourself in the wilderness of British Columbia or the Pacific Northwest, remember the Chapman family. Remember what happened when one mother stood her ground against something that shouldn't exist. There are rules in the wilderness, boundaries we shouldn't cross, beings we shouldn't challenge. Look away if you see one. Don't make eye contact. Don't provoke. Because some encounters carry consequences that echo through time. Some sights once seen can't be unseen. Some beings once witnessed might just witness you back. Today, if you drive Highway 7 through the Fraser Valley, you can pass right by where the Chapman cabin once stood. But that place of terror is long gone, reclaimed by wilderness. The forests remain, the mountains still loom, the Fraser River still flows, the same river that claimed the Chapmans' lives. And in those forests, the creatures that drove them from their homes still walk. The question isn't whether something exists in those woods. The question is, what happens when you look it in the eyes? The Chapman family learned the hard way, and now, so do you.